Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Biggerplate.com. I've been asked by our friends at Mind Manager to suggest some ideas for the ways that teaching staff and faculty in higher education can use mind mapping and visualization techniques to help them in their working. And there are many possibilities here, but I'm just going to focus on a few key areas where I think the most basic visualization and mind mapping techniques can have almost immediate benefits. So let's take a quick look. Okay, so the first area I think you can get real value out of visualizing the information is in what I've called curriculum mapping. And this might mean you're involved in planning out the curriculum, or you simply want to understand where your contribution fits in the larger picture. The benefits of visualizing the information using a map structure are you get a really good sense of both the overview of the curriculum, but also you can dive right in and see quite detailed information all within the same visual diagram, not jumping around to different places to see different level views. Within that same diagram, you can also connect up a lot of information, pull in information from other sources, and give yourself little signposts off to other things that might be relevant as you build out that curriculum. Once you've built out your curriculum map, you've also got a great set of tools to help you focus in on the areas you need to, whether that's simple things like zooming in and out of the diagram, or actually filtering it based on certain icons and information that you've assigned within the map. So let's take a look at how that might work in reality. Okay, so here we've got a Mind Manager document that I'm going to use to sort of start putting into place my initial thoughts for my curriculum for the year ahead. So I've just chosen a subject I know nothing about, and I'm going to plan out the first year curriculum for those poor students. Now, what I've done in Mind Manager is I've kind of broken my year down into semester 1, 2, and 3. And then over here in the structure, I've created just this branch, which is just a list of the modules that we're going to be covering. Under each module, I've then got a little bit more information, some of the key information related to that. So again, this may have come from other places, but I'm pulling it into one place to make it a bit easier. So I've got the aims for this particular module on early modern world. And then I've also got other little things that you can see in the software here to give me a bit of extra depth. So I've got outcomes. I've used the notes feature in here to just give myself a little bit of extra information. And I can pop that open and see that there's a huge amount of extra depth within the information that's just kept off the surface. So the surface level is nice and clean and clear, but I've got extra depth and information just beneath whenever I need it. I've also saved a little link to a website here. This is my old university, and if I click that, the Mind Manager software is going to take me straight to the relevant website to see where I need to be. And again, maybe here's some extra information from the university website about that particular module. So for each one of these modules, we can pull together the relevant information that's going to be needed, including, for example, a reading list. And now what we want to try and do is slot these modules into the relevant parts of the year. So I can just drag and drop these across however I might like, and just start to position either one at a time or maybe two at a time into the different semesters, and then start to see how that looks overall. Now again, I'm just making this up as I go here, but let's say we end up with 3 modules in each one of our semesters. So we've taken care of our modules. I can get rid of that, and immediately we start to get a sense then of this overall view of semester 1, 2, 3, but also knowing that under any one of these topics, we could get right into quite a lot of detail, giving us everything in one place rather than jumping around a lot. The other thing we can do using the software is also start to assign the faculty to different topics. So over here again, I've got another list. It's my list of faculty members, and you see I've got 4 teachers, tutors, whatever you'd like to call them. And I can also then start to assign them to specific modules. So perhaps Blair is in charge of these modules, so I can just drag him onto a few of these. Perhaps Julie is going to take care of these 2 or these 3. Brendan's going to take care of this one, and so on and so forth. And what this is then going to give me is the ability to really quickly filter and just show the ones that those people are in charge of. So having added them as a resource, what I can do in the software, for example, is say, show me only the modules where I, Liam, am going to be the person in charge of it. So very quickly, I reduce this overall schematic down to the bits that I know I need to pay attention to and maybe build out a little bit further. So once you've built out your curriculum and removed the filters so we start to see the whole world, we can also start to see perhaps that maybe we need to cover medieval before we do early modern. We might have a debate with our team around which modules need to be covered in which order. We could even make very visual connections between these modules if we needed to make it very clear to ourselves. Once it's all fleshed out and finalized, it might start to look a little bit more like this. So we go the same diagram but a version 2. And again, what I've got in each of these sections is that extra depth and information. I've got the faculty who's going to be teaching in those classes. I've even gone one step further and started to break down the individual lessons and who is teaching those individual lessons. So again, if I apply that filtering function, I can say, show me the exact lessons, perhaps, that Liam is going to be teaching. Again, if I've populated this map correctly, I'm then going to start seeing even the lessons that I'm teaching. So within one Mind Manager map, in this example, we've created and can view an entire curriculum and keep our overall sense of the whole, but also get right down into the organizational details of who's doing what and when. So that's the first area that I think higher education staff could leverage mind mapping and visualization techniques in planning and getting an oversight of the curriculum for a year or a term. So the second area I think you can get great value if you're in a teaching role is in using mind maps and visualization for your lesson planning. So mind mapping and visualizing the information is really going to help you by providing a single page summary of what you plan to deliver. That single page is really going to help you to get your head around the structure of the time you have and whether you've got a really natural flow to what's going to lead one step after next, which we can sometimes lose when we're presenting and planning in slides. We can sometimes forget what has preceded and what comes after. When you're using mind mapping, you've got a really clear sense of the headline sections you're going to cover, which helps you to just see, does it flow logically, and are you going to be able to keep track of things nice and easily. It also gives you a really nice and adaptable way of planning. You can move the information around. Once you get a sense of that structure and flow, you can reconfigure, change things around as you see fit. So let's take a quick look again at some examples of how you might do that. Okay, so here we are looking at a very blank Mind Manager map at the moment that I'm just going to try and illustrate how we start to build up the skeleton of a lesson plan. So maybe I've got some kind of headline information that I've maybe taken from the curriculum or the sort of guidance for the year. So maybe for this particular lesson, maybe it's the first lesson of the first year, I've got some pretty simple and clear objectives to introduce, to give awareness of main issues, and then gather some early questions. Now, these could actually become the structure of the lesson itself. So I could actually just copy those and paste them onto this central topic. And already I've started to give myself a little bit of a sense of the lesson. So I'm going to hide the rest of the key information. And what I'm going to do now is just simplify this a little bit. So we're going to say introduction. We've got then two themes and debates to get in here, but why not treat each one of those in turn and give ourselves again a really clear sense of what we're going to move through. And then at the end here, we're going to have questions as you might have at the end of a session. So if you imagine this map being the structure of our lesson, I can get rid of that initial bit. We're going to go round the clock working in this kind of direction. Now, once you've got that as your start point, you can start to think about what are those key themes that you want to impart to your students. Well, if we're talking about the early modern world, maybe we're going to have things like technology. Maybe we're going to have things, if it's history, there's almost certainly religion in there somewhere, and maybe something like war or battles or something, I don't know. So we start to build up what are the kind of key themes of the modern era. What are some of the key debates? We could say nation states, we could say religious influence perhaps. Again, just making up with my lack of knowledge. But we just can start to build out a little bit of a skeleton of what we want to cover. And we're not necessarily aiming to have word for word what we're planning to say. What we're really trying to give ourselves here in advance of any lesson or lecture or seminar is a sense of that structure and flow. And we always advise people to build and read and use maps working clockwise. So you start up here with the introduction, you go through the themes, first technology, then religion, then war, etc., etc. And obviously with any of these, you can build out as much information as you like using the software. But importantly, once you start to get a sense of that, you might decide that actually you want to deal with technology after religion and war, so to speak. You want to put war up front. So you can move entire sections of this map really, really easily, including moving this entire section over there and moving this over there. So the maneuverability of your information in your planning is very, very powerful using these mind mapping tools. So once you've done that and built it out a little bit more, it might start to look a little bit more like this kind of version 2 map, which is over here, sorry. So the version 2 map is basically just the same map, but with a little bit more visual. So we've got maybe our overview of what we're trying to achieve. We've broken down these early sections. We're giving that introductory information. We're saying the key events are these ones. This module is going to cover these things. Here are aims and objectives. So we can use this map to inform and say to ourselves, we're going to pause at that point for questions. Then we're going to move into the key themes. And we've started to use some of the other sort of visualization assists here, using the icons of the software to say we're going to deal with technology, then religion, then literature, pause again for questions and move on. So again, moving around the map clockwise, we're giving ourselves a really clear guide of where we're going. And we can zoom in and out on that schematic. And you could print this off and have this as your one-page summary of what you're going to cover. You could even use this mind map as the presentation and guide for the lesson and the lecture in real time. So let's take a look at how you might do that as our third use of mind mapping and visualization in higher education. So the next suggestion I have is to actually use the mind mapping tools live in your lessons to engage your students. And the same is true and works just as well whether it's a physical classroom setting or remote delivery of your lessons. The benefits of using mind mapping tools is you can create really interactive presentations that enable you to step through the topics you want to talk about, just like I am now, but also pause at any point to capture feedback, capture questions, and build into the map as you go. Now again, it takes a little bit of practice, but all I'm doing here is typing, and students can see their ideas, their questions being captured in context in the map as you go. Very powerful way of showing that their lesson, that their input has been heard and is being connected in with the topic. What you can also do using things like the co-editing functions of My Manager is actually have the students contribute to the map on their own computers in their own way. So again, particularly powerful for remote classrooms where maybe students can't be together in a room, is actually to get students working individually or in groups on sections of a mind map or the whole mind map in itself. So the collaborative mapping means you can pull students together around a topic and help them structure their thinking using the collaborative mapping options. Once the lesson is done, you've got a really fantastic structured record of the information that was covered. You could share that as a PDF, you could share it as an interactive export, or you could even share the native file with them to then edit and develop their own, so that they can build out their own ideas, their own thoughts on the structure that you have provided for them. Again, particularly useful for group assignments, getting groups to work on perhaps one section of a mind map where you have provided the key structure and the kickoff points, and the students are then going to go away and deliver and develop those points themselves in groups or individually. So a little bit harder to demonstrate this one, but let's take a look at how you might do that in your own world. So the top tip I would give you here, having delivered lots of workshops and training sessions over the years, is that the quick win here is to use your planning map as your delivery map. Albeit you might do a little bit of editing and tweaking, but the map that you used earlier to plan out your lesson would make for a great delivery tool for the lesson itself. So here's a sort of slightly adapted version of the lesson plan we were looking at earlier. So again, I can use things like the walkthrough mode in My Manager to just click through the topics as we go, and I just use my mouse and it's going to step through the topics as we go. And then I reach a point here where I've got to pause for questions. Now maybe a question comes in and I capture the question, and maybe I even add a little bit of answer information right there in real time using the My Manager software. If I say any more questions, I can then say no more questions, straight back into presenting and stepping through that really nice logical structured flow presentation that I created during my planning stage. Now here I arrive at another point. Maybe I want to build some group working into the lesson. So again, I've been presenting up to this point, but now I could actually maybe break the groups up into, or the large group into smaller groups, and get them to perhaps debate and discuss what they think are perhaps the most influential of the key themes we've talked about. Now in a classroom setting, they might go across and work in their groups. Remotely, you could send them out into breakout rooms in Zoom or whatever it might be. And then what we want to do is capture that feedback as it comes. In a classroom setting, you could just get someone from each group to give you their feedback. We thought this one. Here's because, and again, just capturing headlines. You're not trying to capture word for word. You just want to capture their perspectives in the map. And then again, over to group 2. Now again, if you're delivering this remotely, you could have the groups actually writing in the mind map their feedback in here from all the different students at the same time. Now again, you've got to set down the ground rules for that, but it's a really nice way of getting remote students to contribute into this feedback. And once again, as soon as we've done with the group work, we can pick back up using that really nice step walkthrough mode that My Manager, for example, has. So we can switch really easily between presenting and interacting with our students. A fantastic way of taking that lesson plan that you created and turning it into a really lively, energized lesson, whether again it's in a classroom setting or via remote delivery. Finally, I want to suggest that you use mind mapping tools and visualization for your own academic research and writing. Again, just like we've seen in some of the other examples, mind mapping tools are really fantastic to help you structure your ideas and information. They're going to help you to see that big picture and those small details, and importantly, how that information does or does not logically flow from one section into the next. When you're doing your research, there's some fantastic features like notes and hyperlinks that help you to pull all of the information you need into a single location, rather than having bookmarks and lost pieces of information spread all over the place. A single control point and source of truth for your research. Finally, once you've compiled all of your ideas and information into a structure that makes sense, you can simply push all of that across into Microsoft Word to do the final editing and printing. So you use the mind map to structure your ideas and information, and then Word for what it's for, which is editing and finalization of a written document. Let's take a quick look at how that might work. To illustrate how you can use mind mapping tools like Mind Manager for your research and writing, I've downloaded two mind maps from Biggerplate.com. The first is a dissertation planner that somebody else has created. Now you can see this mind map is not full of color and images. It's all about organizing the ideas, the information, and the research. So you've got some really key headings here that this person is going to use to work around and fill in the blanks by building out the mind map. They're obviously going to start with their introduction, and they're giving themselves little prompts here to give themselves sort of food for thought, and they can then of course build out on any of these topics just using the most basic functions of the software. As they go through the literature review, they might start to use the hyperlinks function to link to online journals or references that they found, or even to downloaded PDFs and documents that again they've used to inform their literature review. So they would use this mind map to just build out a very comprehensive view of what's going to go into that dissertation or that thesis. To use a different example, I've actually got a mind map here, which is one of my first mind maps from nearly 20 years ago when I was at university, which is an example of an essay that I wrote. So again, this is where I started to really get into planning the real structure of the essay itself. So just like we looked at lesson planning earlier, thinking about the start, the next bit, so the sequence of information. But the same principle applies. It doesn't look nice. It's not about images and color. It's about structuring the content that I want to put into my essay. So you see here I've got real paragraphs of text. I've got the writers that I want to be citing in that opening paragraph for the sort of referencing. Then we go into the first piece. I'm breaking down how I'm going to approach it in my essay, so on and so forth. So you can see if I sort of expand this map out into its entirety, it's quite big. Now, this is quite a lot of information, but if I ask my manager to do so, it can send all of that into a Word document, and then all I'm really doing is the final editing. So to do that in my manager, I would just hit the export. I would go to the export to Word, and I'm going to just choose to do a custom export here to give me a few more options. I'm going to ask it to do or not do a few different things depending on what I do or don't want in my final document. You don't need to worry about what I'm doing here too much, but what I'm saying is at the end of this, please send this all into a document that is just going to be not numbered. We're going to have some indenting, and hopefully we're going to have something at the end of it that's going to look relatively coherent and could be essentially a first draft of our final written document. So the Mind Manager software is now just working its way clockwise around the mind map, soaking up all of the topics in the order that I've organized them in. So all of those ideas and information and research that I've put together in the map, it's now cycling through that and pushing that all into what will hopefully be a pretty coherent Word document at the end of the process. If I now click to open that Word document, you'll see all of that structure that I wrote has now been converted into something that's starting to look a little bit more like a written essay. So that initial introduction section of my mind map is right here. And again, there's still work to do in terms of fleshing it out in written prose, but what I've now got is a structure I'm happy with, and I now within Word focus on just the wording and the writing and the editing. I don't have to deal with that issue of scrolling up and down 20 pages and trying to move sections because I've realized the flow of my text doesn't make sense. So you use the mind mapping software to organize the ideas and the information, and Microsoft Word to do the final editing and printing of your written document. So there you have it, a quick overview of the key areas where I think mind mapping and visualization techniques can help higher education faculty. For plenty of templates and examples, as well as helpful webinars on this topic, head on over to biggerplate.com, where there's a huge wealth of education-focused resources. If you want to try and implement some of these techniques yourself, head on over to mindmanager.com to grab a free 30-day trial of the Mind Manager product. Good luck with your mapping, and thanks for watching.